this is Mish and welcome to this explanation video of the new TV show that's hit Netflix in December. So it's called Dark. I'll try to make this video as concise and condensed as possible. So going forward, this will contain spoilers from the TV show if you haven't watched it yet. Pause this, then come back when you are ready. So this show, Dark, was obviously dealing with a lot of time travel. So we have a lot of ambiguity, a lot of unknowns. A lot of unknowns around some characters' behaviors, some character backstory, as they're never actually revealed to us. So as the show said right throughout it as well, which adds to the confusion and I guess the complexity of it, the end is the beginning is the end. So throughout the show, we're dealing with what they say is the Ariadne thread. So that's a Greek mythology around a maze or a puzzle or a labyrinth. And as you know, with a labyrinth, there's generally one way in and one way out. But there's many different paths that are leading to dead ends. So it's a good way to think of this whole show, I think, is that Ariadne thread. But the basic premise for the show, so the main timeline plot, in my opinion, goes like this. Once again, this is all in the eye of the beholder, so I imagine many people have varying different opinions on this, but this is how I perceived it. So in 1986, the nuclear power plant had an incident. So we had a hydrogen buildup that caused an explosion. So the power plant managed to fix it and hide the event by paying off the staff. But what came out of that event was a three-dimensional wormhole which was created within that tunnel, within the cave. So we have 33 years time difference between the planes of the three-dimensional wormhole. So we have 1953, 1986, 2019. And at this point when the wormhole was created, this is where things get confusing because you can almost say at that point when it was created is when all these events occurred. It really gets confusing, and we have the whole chicken and egg scenario as to which came first. The past affects the future affects the past. So it's pretty complex trying to explain it, let alone trying to think about it. So we have multiple parties trying to get different outcomes within the show. Trying to find the first point of change in the timeline is very tricky. So the first incidents we see of people actually using time travel is when we see the two bodies of the boys in 1953. Also preceded very quickly by Gretchen, which almost in a way I can almost think that dog is the first event. So it was just a naturally occurring incident where Helga threw the stick and Gretchen the dog chased it. There was no intent for time travel, but it occurred. So could that be the first situation where that made Claudia aware of the situation? She started becoming curious about what occurred and what was the result of that explosion. So that sparks her curiosity, you could say. So the main story arcs, I guess outlines how the wormhole was made. But the main story arcs within the time traveling, within the show, for me, go like this. I'll start with Mikhail. But that doesn't mean that's the first event. But his was the first major time-traveling event that was shown to us in the TV show. But the main point would be, so Mikhail was obviously kidnapped in 2019 and put back into 1986, which caused a ripple effect. As Mikhail grew up and had a family with Hannah, they obviously had Jonas. Then Mikhail, or Michael as he was known at that point, killed himself. So Mikhail missing also caused Ulrich to go back in time in an attempt to kill Helga. So he left, I guess his footprints all over the past, but he left his phone with H.G. Tannhaus, so the clock worker. He also left a lasting mark on the police, we see that. And all these points had profound consequences. The attack on Helga is probably what started him down the path with Noah. We see later he travels to 1986. And that is also when Jonas goes into the future. But yeah, when Helga as a boy transported to 1986, he probably ended up at that point meeting Noah. Ulrich really put his footprints everywhere. So also because of Mikhail going back in time, we also see that Jonas travels back in time to save Mikhail. But ultimately, Jonas gets captured himself by Noah, put in a bunker. So then, I guess, where did Noah come from is a good question. 1986, possibly, or is he something else? He's a dark character. There's a heavy suggestion that he's very evil, almost a devil, you could say. So he himself, Noah, is trying to make a time machine. So unsuccessful for the most part, but we don't see him succeed. But it must have worked for him to travel around. He's so knowledgeable that he must have got it to work quite often because he knows what is going to occur. We also have Claudia doing the same thing, but she's using the blueprint that she gave H.G. Tannhaus back in 1953 to make a time machine. So we don't see much of Claudia apart from initially when she starts figuring it all out. Then later we just get her at the end of her timeline. So once again, we have Ulrich fumbling around in time, leaving his footprints over everything. Obviously his plan to kill Helga as a child is, I guess his reason behind that is to stop the whole timeline from starting. If he thinks he can kill him, then he doesn't know about Noah. He doesn't know about anything else. He just knows that Helga has a part in this. So if he kills him, he might stop the first kidnapping and therefore stop the whole thing. But ultimately, all these events fall into place as they have done many times before, and the cycle continues. Is everything just repeating like it has done and will do because the wormhole is constant? Are these characters actually able to change things? Will one day they succeed in breaking out of the cycle? According to H.G. Tannhaus, so the clockworker, he said no, it's not possible to break out of this time loop. Thinking about that, we see future Jonas. So when he takes that time machine, trying to blow up the wormhole cave, is it successful? That's an unknown, and I think that is really on your perspective of how you viewed it. But for me, the cycle seems to start again, as we see that Jonas gets thrown into the future, where he and Helga swap. So Helga ends up in 1986. My first assumption is that Jonas actually ends up in 2052, so 33 years on from 2019. And then he would have to wait 33 years again before being able to use the cave to return, unless he finds a time travel device, which he doesn't. He seems to use the cave to travel. So we see Jonas end up in Claudia's bunker, as we see her rifle on the shelf. So we're talking about the young Jonas here. When he lands up in the bunker, in Claudia's bunker at that point, did future Jonas make a nuclear winter? Did he cause an EMP explosion which plunged part of Europe into darkness, possibly causing their local power plants to melt down in this future time? Jonas is therefore working on trying to fix things, and we see he's got a lot of information that he's detailed out when he comes back in time to 2019. We see all his documentation. So he's trying to get that time machine going. He's trying to figure it all out, trying to undo it. Claudia is probably in the same time as Jonas at that point, possibly working together. We have a reference that they did work together, but how heavily we don't know. So 33 years later, Jonas returns, 2019, trying to change the events that he saw unfold before. And then the cycle continues, because at that point, he's himself again. But don't forget, we have Claudia as well, and Noah. They're both trying to change the future as well, the future and the past. So Noah seems to be that force of evil, trying to stop Claudia and Jonas. So we have a real struggle between good and evil with this show, which is quite nice. In the end, you kind of see that coming together. It is a struggle between the light and the darkness. But it has so many open-ended questions that we may never find out. This has been a really basic overview because the show is so confusing about time travel. I think I kind of pointed out the main things, how it all started, what the starting point was, a lot of people's motives, and how it ends up and seems to go in a cyclic fashion. But as H.G. Tannhaus said, we have no control over the outcome even though we can try. But many suggestions do point that there is a solution. Because as I mentioned before, if we talk about the Ariadne thread, which was referenced in the show. So let's take a labyrinth, for example, and we see pictures of a labyrinth, and we also have the play at the school, which is a reference to this as well, that if it's a labyrinth, there is a solution to this puzzle. There is a way in and a way out. But the problem is, how many times are they going to try and find the correct path? And on the other side, is Noah constantly moving the correct path? So this could go on forever. We have so many different ways to look at it. It's pretty awesome. Yeah, I'm going to leave this here because I just wanted to kind of cover off the main points that I found. How did you think? Do you think what I've captured here is a rough guide to what is actually in the show. Once again, with time travel, it's so ambiguous, it's so confusing that you can really get anything from it. But this show was amazing. I really did enjoy it. I'll leave this video here. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope I didn't confuse the situation more than when you started. But leave me some feedback below. Subscribe for future content around this shows and other things. Obviously check out the channel. Like this video if you liked it. But until next time, this is Mesh, and I'll see you later.